Hello and welcome to TECHunplugged panel discussion sponsored by VeloCloud. We are today live in London at the One Summit, and I have the big luck and privilege to be here with a panel of very seasoned experts in SD-WAN. Can I ask each of you to introduce yourself, please? So, starting with you, Sanjay.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Samir Desai. I'm the global product lead for SD-WAN at GTT. My remit covers the US and Americas, and I'm based in London.
My name is Sanjay Uppal, and I run the VeloCloud business at VMware. And prior to that, I used to be the CEO and co-founder of VeloCloud Networks.
I'm Greg Farrow, co-host and co-producer of the Packet Pushers podcast.
And hi everyone, my name's Leo White. I'm a principal consultant at PA Consulting, part of our networks practice.
Thank you very much, everyone. So I have a first question, which is about what is the current adoption pace for SD-WAN? So if you want
Not fast enough?
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of SD-WAN, and I think the thing about SD-WAN is that not only can you save money on MPLS, which justifies spending money on SD-WAN. Once you get to SD-WAN, everything improves. You get visibility, you get improved bandwidth, you get application performance. So it doesn't matter what the current pace is. To me, it's just not fast enough because I'm tired of configuring routers for a living.
I think that's a very practical way of looking at it. If you look at it from a standpoint of the amount of endpoints that will be converted to SD-WAN, my unscientific sum is somewhere between 15 and 18 million endpoints. And we've reached a little over 500,000 from an industry standpoint. But that growth is, in triple digits from a year-to-year basis. So the pace is fast, but of course it should be faster because of all the benefits that SD-WAN does bring. Apart from the cost benefit, there's all the performance benefits, there's the visibility benefit, and then the application benefits, because SD-WAN really exposes and improves upon all the application layer functionality that companies have been looking for decades but haven't been able to get so far.
Absolutely. I'd probably describe it as we're in the middle of an industry revolution rather than an evolution that we've had through the past. What we see is exactly what my colleagues have just described. I don't think I've met one opportunity, whether they're finance or manufacturing or retail, that hasn't looked at SD-WAN, hasn't come up with a visionary approach on how to adopt SD-WAN. The challenges that a lot of them have are how to adopt it in a way that keeps their network seamless and the migration to SD-WAN seamless enough. But by and large, we went into the SD-WAN business little short of 18 months ago with VMware or VeloCloud at the time, and the uptake, the pace of uptake and interest has been frankly amazing. And I just see we're now probably on the cusp of mainstream adoption over the next 2 years, and I think we haven't seen it yet. I think the rate of adoption will only accelerate.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, the pace should be quicker. I think we're going for a network transformation in the WAN, but I think we need to make it easy for our customers. There is so much choice in the market. Standardization needs to still be fixed. I think that there are a couple of barriers that we need to fix. If we get those right, then it will explode. But the pace should be quicker, but I think there's a lot that we can do to try and make that happen.
I disagree about standardization. I think there's so much business value from having SD-WAN that waiting for standardization is bad for business. Right?
I counter that because I think it is bad for business. I think there's a fine balance between standardization. I think from an enterprise perspective, when we talk with enterprise customers, they want to know that they're not tied in. There's no vendor lock-in. So I think as long as we can...
See, now this is one we can ask Sanjay, because I don't believe there's a vendor lock-in, right? SD-WAN is an overlay, right? So if I have two SD-WAN solutions side by side, that doesn't matter. My business still works.
As long as they really do work.
Yes, and they do, right? And so what I'm seeing now from my clients is they've got two running side by side. And they don't have a lock-in because they're deprecating the one they bought 3 or 4 years ago and running a second one up, and it's a gradual migration. So it's much more like a data center in that you're constantly upgrading your SD-WAN. There's no lock-in there because you don't, the old days of I've got brand C router and brand J router and they have to be standardized. That's the underlay. That's not the overlay. The overlay is different.
So I think that makes a very great transition to my next question, which was about what have you learned, about SD-WAN implementation with your customers? What is the journey they've had, jumping into this technology, going away from standard, lease line and PLS and so on?
Yeah, I'll go. Maybe Sanjay, I'm sure you'll add more color to that. From our experience, it's as we just agreed, the adoption's there. Yes, I do agree with you. There's the vendor proliferation is something we need to address. We need standardization does help. I think over the longer term. I think from an adoption perspective, we're seeing a lot of interest. Key challenges are around the migration aspects to SD-WAN, as I described earlier, and how we as a carrier-based network provider offering the right sort of managed services can help clients adopt to an SD-WAN end state seems to be the perennial challenge across all of the sectors that we operate in. The rate of adoption in some sectors, some verticals is greater than others, as we've seen, but they all have challenges in migrating to SD-WAN. I think the SD-WAN as the gift that keeps on giving is clear. I think everyone's very, very clear on the benefits of SD-WAN. It's how you get to the end state. That's the challenge. And the quicker we make it easier for everyone, the better.
Yeah, I think that I actually agree with Greg. I think from a standardization standpoint, that's really not to me an impediment to growth. Mm-hmm. The benefits are so large that people are getting, that they're adopting SD-WAN. And certainly I've seen some customers that will put more than one vendor in the network. And of course it still works because it's an overlay solution. You can mix and match different underlays and you can still get it to work. Now, if you want a single business policy to run across different vendors, then today that's not available. But in the future, you can see that with the work that MEF and other folks are doing, that could become available. But I don't think that standardization is really an impediment to getting there.
You shouldn't let it be an impediment. You should.
Just to sort of be clear on this, I think I'm not saying it should stop. I'm just saying it's a key factor in a strategic decision that's been made by an organisation.
Yeah, but no, that doesn't work.
And they need to just to kind of emphasise, they need to have the ability to plug and play. They don't want to get locked in. And there's a proliferation of vendors out there. And it's how do you compare one vendor against another?
We've got the same thing in the public cloud. We've got GCP, Azure, and AWS, and they are not in any way compatible. There are no standards, and people are out there extracting business value. We have to put standards on hold for a while and wait for the cycle.
I disagree.
Right? There's just too much business value in cloud and too much business value in SD-WAN to have a standards debate because you're going to lose. If you wait for the standards to come out, your business will be gone.
I think it might be standards, it might be governance, but there needs to be a way of managing the different proliferation. So I think it's down to a customer decision. Yeah. I think if they decide they want to go. That's great.
The analogy to the public cloud is a good one. Yes, there are 3 large public cloud providers, and for a moment there were 10, and then people just couldn't invest and get there, and so now there are 3 plus 1, and then people are adopting niche positions. I mean, you could count Oracle as a 4th, but now there are not just the large public cloud folks. There are people adopting niche positions, smaller ones that will be intermediate clouds, like the security folks are setting up clouds, mid-mile folks are setting up clouds. You have the edge cloud that's coming in. And I think the analogy to SD-WAN is good because SD-WAN is also going to be set up as one of these clouds, because we've always said from the beginning the cloud is the network. That doesn't mean you're completely locked in to VMware. You can actually adopt that.
It's only going to last 3 years before you throw it out and replace it.
And you can actually put it. There's several dimensions in which you don't get locked in. One is since it's a software network, you could in fact have the same hardware infrastructure and architecture and put different software vendors on top. We're not completely there yet, but I think the really interesting standardization is really around business policy, because people don't want to set separate business policies for different parts of their network. Today they're doing it.
But we don't have a business policy in our routed networks today, right?
Yeah.
You can argue that you can put a business policy across, but you can't. The best you've got is QoS. Fingers crossed you might.
But with SD-WAN, you can actually say that here's my business policy, and the business policy meaning,
yes,
here are the applications that are important, here are the ones that are not, and if what happens to my security policy, what happens to my performance policy, what happens to my cost policy. You can actually define those, and they're defined differently depending on which vendor it is. But I think that's a different standardization problem than just saying, let's have standards and people are not going to move until they have them. I disagree with that. I
agree with that. Really I agree. There's different types of standards. I think what I'm looking for is just that ability to talk the same language between different vendors. And I'm not advocating 18-month cycles. We've been there before.
You would do that today, you would be automating. You'd whip out your Python script in your favorite whatever, and you would script onto the top. So if that's important to you, that's your way out of it, is to do a little bit of artisanal hand scripting, you know, carve it out of a piece of wood, with you know, and that's the way you would map that together. If that's important to you, that's what you
And we had that discussion this morning with EasyJet, right? They talked about standardization. They want to standardize their sites, and so they're clearing their mess out, and then they know exactly what the requirements are on a case-by-case basis.
But that's what EasyJet's talking about there is maturity. So they've gone through the first phase of innovation, captured business value, delivered money, generated value for the business. Now the business needs to go to the maturity phase. So they now need to go back and take away all the pain of the early adoption that made them money, that set them up, that put them in business to be in a position where maturing is the way. And that's what SD-WAN needs. Go through the early stage.
But just pick up on a point Sanjay raised earlier. It's you can't underestimate the benefits of virtualization as an aid to driving greater adoption. Yes, standardization for the sake of it is not necessarily a good thing, but for example, what we're doing and what a lot of our carrier competitors are doing is, you know, the concept of universal CPE, the ability to service chaining VNFs, the ability to create a catalog of VNFs that you can consume not only on the prem but in the cloud and also on within a hyperscale cloud environment, the ability to bring it all together into a managed service environment. You know, these are all us using the benefits of technology to drive greater adoption to the end state that we all agree on quite violently, right? There's an SD-WAN end state, and how do you make it easier?
So one question also around, we talked about business value, about the fact that there is no standardization yet. I would like to ask you one question, Sanjay, is what is the differentiator, what is the value that you're bringing to customers that is making your solution unique?
Yeah, so what's gotten us here to this point where we have 5,800 customers out there with more than 170,000 sites, there's really three differentiators. And then I want to talk about where this is headed. The first one is the ability to make real-time applications work over best effort networks. I think that's a tough problem to solve. To make voice, video, VDI, and IoT, the four categories of real-time apps, run over best effort networks is not an easy problem to solve. So that's the first one. The second one is really the simplicity that comes from automation, because it's amazing, like, before and after, when you have the network engineering team get in and deploy SD-WAN, which is software defined, and then you can just change how the physical network works by making different software changes. That's through automation, and that's a sea change from what networking has been architected for the last several decades. And the third one is really dealing with the cloud, which is how do we get automated access to the cloud? So those three are the differentiators. But I think where this is headed is just about two very simple things. It's about scale and scope. So while there may be 70 vendors in this space, what distinguishes us from the others, and of course it's not that the others don't have some aspects of this, but if you really look at scale, how can you get a single network to run hundreds of thousands of sites? How can you get a single enterprise to scale to more than 10,000 sites? That's important. Scale should run even for a site, a network of 10 sites to a network of tens of thousands of sites. And then scope. I'll talk about scope a little bit later, but it's no longer just about branch talking to where the applications are in the data center. It goes much beyond that. So it's really scale and scope.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any comments from your side about what Sanjay said? Anything you want to add or?
Not for me.
Okay.
I mean, I think the scale and scope is fine, but that's a problem once you've started. I think we're still at the point that it's emergent. And what Sanjay's addressing is there are customers out there scaling up to large. Yes. And that is not an insignificant challenge in SD-WAN. A lot of SD-WAN products are limited in scale. Okay. And that's his point, is he's differentiating and saying VeloCloud can scale. Since
you're bringing up the topic of scale, to some extent, I'm going to make a kind of plug into the cloud aspect of VeloCloud. You have cloud in your name. That's one of the things that you're talking about, the fact that you're enabling direct communication from branch sites directly to SaaS offerings in the cloud. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we've said from the get-go that we've used the phrase, the cloud is the network. And so, what SD-WAN is today is you go from the edge of a branch office, you go through this network, which we say the cloud is the network, and then you go to the other edge, which is the edge of a data center, whether it's a private or public data center. But now, what that cloud is actually expanding. So from the branch, you're going not just from the edge of the branch, you're crossing over the Wi-Fi LAN boundary into individual clients. So that conversation is now client to cloud. The other end of it, where it used to be going up to the edge of a of a data center, it's now crossing over and getting into where the applications are constructed, and that's into a VM or a container. So that's cloud to container. So very simply, we call this expanding of the scope of SD-WAN as client to cloud to container. When you look at that cloud in the center, it's not one cloud. It's actually a network of clouds. So you have our cloud of gateways, which is the first hop into the network. Then you can have a security cloud, you can have a mid-mile cloud, you can have an analytics cloud, you can have an edge cloud, all before you get to the destination application cloud, which could be in IaaS, it could be in SaaS. So when you look at this network of clouds, it changes the conversation. It makes SD-WAN into a platform. And when I say platform, I'm really not talking about just service chaining VNFs at the edge. I'm talking about service chaining clouds, both intermediate and destination clouds. And I think that is where the conversation is really headed, because that makes it a lot closer to where the containers are. And the containers could be at the edge, they could be in the gateway, they could be in the public cloud, they could be in the private cloud, they could be moving around as VMware has done with vMotion. This is where SD-WAN, the scope of SD-WAN is headed, and this is why it's so exciting, because it's getting much closer to the applications.
It's not just about branch to data center, it's branch to cloud, it's branch to SaaS, it's branch to branch.
And it's also cloud to cloud. There may not even be a branch in the middle. It might just be that there are, there's a VNet over here from Azure, there's a VPC from Amazon, and how do you actually communicate between the two? If you're an enterprise and you have several business units, you have a cloud interconnect problem. And that, to me, is also an SD-WAN issue.
Yeah, as soon as you do that, you've got a cloud monitoring problem, because the Azure and the AWS and the Alibaba are all different. And you need to see it. Their visibility tools stop at the edge of their services, and now you've got a multi-platform problem. You need something that's isolated from them to give you a consistent view of the whole.
And is it more than just cloud to cloud? It's the business value of being interconnected into partners and other providers. So I know we've been focused very much on the technology aspect. I think we could take a step back from this. Actually, what SD-WAN is a platform. You're absolutely right. There's a network transformation going on, but it's more than just connectivity and cloud to cloud. It's actually being closer to your partners, closer to your suppliers, and the value you can get from that. And yeah, standardization shouldn't hold it back. I agree with that. If it can foster that innovation, that's what the business wants at the end of the day, guys. It's technology. Technology is one aspect, but it's value to the organization, value to the business, and being close as an ecosystem.
I call that permissionless networking. One of the unique things about SD-WAN is instead of having to go and ask for permission from the telco, or permission from the cloud provider, or permission from this person, can I connect to you? I can now all connect everything up to the public WAN. You call it internet, I call it a public WAN, and I can have permission to connect to anybody anywhere. So wherever I can...
That's powerful, right?
That's
speed to market, ideas, product innovation.
Yeah. Not only speed to market, but speed to unmarket. Make a mistake, set up a branch, the branch fails, shut it down, walk away. If you're a retail business, you set up a store, you set it up for 6 weeks, you get a special deal to have 6-week pop-up store. If the numbers don't match, I can take it out. I can say failure, move on, but I didn't sign a 5-year commitment to be in that, mall, and now I've got this cost sitting on my balance sheet.
Yeah, and if you take a step back, I think it's, the carriers and the service providers and the telcos will always be there. And, very, very happy to have GTT as a good partner. But the underlying infrastructure and the business models that would drive them have changed. So it used to be, the telco network very carefully engineered. For a new feature to come in, it would take a year or two. Yeah. The compute side of the house has won, folks. And the compute side of the house is, very agile. We can make changes into our network of gateways on a weekly basis. This is just like how Google makes changes into, what's going on in the network. You don't even know when you're searching, there's actually a change being made to the search algorithms that are running. And that side of the house has taken over, and we are now using cloud and virtualization technologies to run these networks. So I like this permissionless, piece of this, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, you can't, if you were actually asked for permission, it's going to take you weeks and months to get anything done. Yeah. Here you can just make a software change on the fly, and the people who are running it are still the telcos. I mean, these folks are running these networks, but the underlying infrastructure, the technology, and the business model has changed.
Because I was going to say, how does the service side cater for that? Because there's the agility, but I guess customers want service, right? They want a global service.
And the sooner telcos adopt SD-WAN as a platform in its completeness, the better. So, for example, let's not underestimate the importance of the underlay. Let's not underestimate the importance of direct connectivity to the cloud. Let's not underestimate the importance of customers are looking for a full cohesive SLA experience that not only provides application level SLA experience, but also what are we going to do about the underlay that's driving a bad SLA experience. They need a cohesive, seamless service. How do you optimize connectivity to a SaaS application? You go to a tier 1 ISP provider, for example. You're right in the sense that it's forcing telcos to adopt the agility model that the SD-WAN brings, forcing telcos to get to that SD-WAN as a platform type solution. For example, what we've done is that we've replicated those gateways in our network, for example. And
I have a very
invest in it
hostile
very
relationship with telcos. I
Yeah.
generally don't think that
Yeah.
telcos have offered a lot of value for decades. And one of the great things
Yes.
about SD-WAN is it's forcing them into true customer service.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of these
Agreed.
SD-WAN
Agreed.
platforms, we suddenly
Yeah.
find out that they're in breach of SLA and have been for
Absolutely.
years. And all of a sudden, these organizations that are slow moving, ignorant of the problems, ignorant of their own defects, are suddenly being shown up. And so it is good for customers, right? At the end of the day, these organizations, telcos, are going to have to go through a transformation of their own.
Yeah, totally agree with
to
that.
become,
Totally agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But even more, coming back to this permissionless idea, I'll send you an invoice later for that. The permission thing is I don't need to go to the telco to get permission to do things. I don't need to add a route, delete a route, add a branch, delete a branch. I don't need to go and talk to a managed service provider to make that change. I can just go to the console and go bang, and it's done.
Yeah.
Zero touch provisioning, send out a generic box from, in the VeloCloud case, I just get a Dell box, ship it to site, plug it back. I may, as a network engineer, never touch this stuff, and yet turn it on, connect it up, boom, zero touch provisioning, automatically integrated with the cloud, configuration is down, policies are enabled. That's permissionless, right?
And it's
That's
almost
the
it's almost what the
computer
telcos
side
needed.
right?
Sorry.
It's the compute side of the house that has done this before. When things move to the cloud, whether it's applications or compute or storage, when that happened, it was virtualization that got all this agility in, and we're just adopting the same principle into the network.
And I was going to say, I mean, it's actually needed. It's a good thing for the industry, telco industry, because it has been lazy. It has had a monopoly. It has been slow, and now with SD-WAN, it's this transformation, this platform. It's really nice to hear the platform, because I think that's what the industry needed to actually make a step change in terms of permissionless. You don't need to go to a telco and wait 18 months for services.
No, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with getting to that permissionless model for the platform application, visibility, analytics, SLA management layer, and still work with a telco that's agile enough to give you the right and optimized access solution.
Agreed.
Where you're
Agreed.
not stuck to a metro loop investment.
It's an enabler for the
where you have a
telcos.
choice of underlying.
You do need the underlay. There's no doubt about it. You need the underlay.
But you've got a choice, right?
Yes, you have a choice.
You've got a choice of underlays.
Previously, you may have been locked into your 5 and 3 year contracts. Now you have a choice. And now, in fact, interestingly enough, the telcos and service providers would even aggregate the underlays for you. Maybe one of them it's their own underlay, but then they'll get other underlays for you. In fact, there are some of them that have an MVNO model. They don't have any underlay, but they'll aggregate other underlays for you, which is fascinating.
There's even telcos out there that are just aggregating the billing for you. Like if you're running 1,000 site branch network, well, you've got at least 2,000, likely up to 4,000 telco connections. That's a significant accounting challenge, and it may just be that an MSP that's the only feature of them that you actually even want, right? So it's not like it's not like they are useless, although they are useless. They're just, you've got to find new uses.
They're different, maybe.
Well, I was thinking you have to find new
There's a different
uses.
value chain here that we're
Yeah,
building, and you need to fit into that value chain.
New uses for
Agree.
their uselessness.
No, actually, in the last 5 minutes of discussion, you've been covering at least 3 or 4 of the questions I asked.
Dynamic.
Flow, right?
Yeah, just look. One extra question on SD-WAN. Do you think that SD-WAN is bringing more security to networks?
Yes, I think, properly architected, security becomes a set of services that you can layer onto SD-WAN much easier than if you do security how it's done today, which is to get security locked into specific boxes, and then you got to sprinkle these boxes around. And then, the question that was asked earlier, do you have edge security or cloud? That's not a choice. I mean, you have to look at what your security architecture is, and then you should be able to turn security on and off depending on what your security profile is, as simply as how you can add new virtual services. So absolutely, SD-WAN as a platform can have any level of security, whether you're the government or whether you're just a pizza shop with 5 locations, you can have the firewall, anti-malware, IDS, IPS, URL filtering, confidentiality, non-repudiation, encryption, you name it. This can be chained together. The important thing is the flexibility that you get with SD-WAN. It's a set of virtual services. You can connect them together, whether in the edge or whether they're in the cloud, and it can be set by the business policy. So I think that the reason why network and security is getting closer together is partly because of the flexibility that SD-WAN brings.
Can I just add, I think security is not getting easier. I think security can never be easy. It's all about managing risk. So if your risk appetite is low, then you've got less to worry about. If it's high and you're a government department, my God, the security that you need to look at is going to have to be really, really tight. So I think we are impartial. We deal with security on a bigger perspective. I think it's very dangerous to say it's any easier. It just depends on the customer.
No, I don't think it's easier. I think it's a mess right now, but I think SD-WAN brings rationalization to security. And I think that is because of the power of the platform, it actually makes it possible to be able to layer this security together.
Because once upon a time, putting a firewall at every branch was impractical.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, your SD-WAN is a firewall because it's an application inspection engine.
That's a use case, yeah.
So I come across that a little bit. I would say that security is getting easier, not because security is getting easier, but because the tools are better.
Yes,
yeah.
So there's corresponding software-defined, cloud-controlled, centralized, drive security. The tools that we use to drive SD-WAN are concomitant with security. So application inspection, visibility, logging, centralized configuration. Like
it gives you more capability. It gives you more capability, right?
SD-WAN
but it depends on the organization.
Like even at the simplest level, SD-WAN gives us configuration management of our edge devices for the first time in 30 years.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
That has benefits.
Like just starting right there.
Agreed. I think it's just dangerous to paint a picture that makes everything easy. There are definitely some aspects of it that
I agree.
That does.
I think the power of SD-WAN as a platform forces a lot of the opportunities we speak to rethink the security architecture.
Agreed. Yes.
The need to have a robust security architecture is greater than ever, right? With what's going out there, it's how you then drive best of breed security within an overall SD-WAN experience, and make sure that your established security technologies are just as agile as the
really
SD-WAN
interesting
platform
part about
within
SD-WAN
a
is watching
business policy approach.
I think security. I think SD-WAN security is SD-WAN is one part of security. I think is the major message, but what it does is give you more capabilities. Absolutely.
So then you've got to be careful there because
it's a bigger picture.
You've got firewall companies like Fortinet deploying SD-WAN in their firewalls and Palo Alto and so on, right? And then you've got SD-WAN companies.
But everyone's jumping onto the SD-WAN gravy train. I mean,
not so much. I think what you're actually seeing here is the convergent, right? I think that security for data in motion is SD-WAN. You've got to stop thinking about it as WAN, data center, campus. There's data in motion, data at rest. And there's a certain type of security that we apply to the data center at rest.
Yep.
And there's a certain type of security policy that we apply to data in motion, SD-WAN. Yep. Right? The campus is already becoming part of the SD-WAN.
And can I ask a question? Yeah. If there is convergence, how many organizations have one single department that does security and network? I just had some conversations with some customers out here at this event, and they still are in silos. So the platform's driving a transformation, and the organisations are going to have to transform. So I totally agree.
Yes.
But the organisational culture and setup is not yet converged.
And this is an interesting point. So how many vendors have a security silo and a product silo, right? And that's because they sell it to the customers in a way that they want to buy it. And that's the transformation in SD-WAN. That I mean, if we're talking about futures, good work. Is how do we get SD-WAN? Like my long-term view is that there's SD-WAN, which is all data in motion. It's MDM, it's endpoints, it's laptops, right? It doesn't matter where it's the Beyond Corp, it's identity management. Whether you're in a campus or on a Wi-Fi or a branch.
You should still get access to the WAN. I mean, that's the change in scope. The clients are included as well. Right now, if you look at SD-WAN, most of the people think about it as a branch to application or data center access, but it's not just that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I mean, security is more
clients.
than networking, right? The security is about policy, it's about data
Governance,
controls, it's
compliance.
about access, it's governance.
Absolutely.
So but you're right, in terms of the physical silo, in the long term, networking will continue to play a major role in security in terms of handling data in motion security. So where the data is in motion, there will be an SD-WAN. It'll be called something else. It'll have some other name. And
I like SD-WAN because lots of people say, oh, there's SD branch and there's SD LAN and there's SD this and there's SD that. It's in the end of the day, all these things are all connected to a network. It's a wide area network, and so it's just expansion of scope of SD-WAN. I don't think we need to come up with a whole new set of acronyms of SD this and SD that.
Very good. So, we're getting close to the end of the session. So, any last thoughts you'd like to share, Sanjay, about where this is headed at, the whole SD-WAN industry, or anything you want to share about the future of VeloCloud, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what's happening on the client side, which is, by clients I mean the devices. It could be human users, it could be sensors, things that people talk about this Internet of Things. All of those also need to connect to a wide area network. And then where are the applications? How are they being constructed? Application development is moving from a virtualization from a VM standpoint into a container standpoint. So when you look at it, it's these clients that need to talk to containers at the end of the day. What's in the middle? That's the wide area network. And that's the purview and scope of SD-WAN. And the companies that have that architectural framework in mind, that it's a client to cloud to container conversation, and the cloud is actually a set of clouds, it's not just one gigantic cloud. That kind of architecture is the one that I feel is going to win when done with the right scale. And scale is not just architecture, it's not just technological scale. You need the number of people to deploy these things as well. So it's human scale as well. It's also financial scale. So it's, you need those sellers on the street to get these things done. And that's when you're going to get to the pace that Greg is looking for. So that scale and scope is really, I think, where this whole SD-WAN conversation and the deployments are headed.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for participating in this panel. Thank you, Samir, Sanjay, Greg, and Leo as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
bye.
much.